After years studying economics and international trade, I've become convinced of one thing. Geography matters far more than most people realize. It doesn't determine everything, but it shapes trade, security, agriculture, industrialization, and influences which countries become wealthy and powerful. Over the next century, a handful of countries may be especially well positioned to rise because of it. Here are 4 I'd watch closely. Some might surprise you. Start with Vietnam. Vietnam has over 3,400 kilometers of coastline on the South China Sea, one of the most important trade corridors in the world. It has navigable river deltas in the north and the south. Its northern highlands are temperate. Its young population is large, better educated than its income level might suggest, and moving rapidly into cities. Vietnam's geography puts it at the natural crossroads of Southeast Asian trade. To its north, the largest manufacturing economy in the world. To its south, the Strait of Malacca and the entire Indian Ocean trade system. It sits, in other words, exactly where you'd want to be if you were designing a manufacturing export hub from scratch. And that is exactly what Vietnam is becoming. As global supply chains have started shifting away from China, driven by rising Chinese wages, geopolitical tension, and companies wanting to spread out their manufacturing, Vietnam has been the primary winner. Samsung manufactures over half of its global smartphone output there. Nike, Apple, Intel, LG, the list of companies that have moved significant production to Vietnam is long and growing. The country has grown at 6 to 7% per year for much of the last decade, and the geographic foundations supporting that growth aren't going anywhere. Vietnam is not without challenges. Its political structure, corruption, and infrastructure gaps are real, but its geographic fundamentals are as strong as any emerging economy on the planet. Now look at Poland. Poland sits on the northern European plain, the single most agriculturally productive and logistically central stretch of land in Europe. It has access to the Baltic Sea. It borders Germany, the largest economy in Europe, and sits directly between Western Europe and Ukraine, which is in the early stages of what will likely be a decades-long rebuilding project. Poland's geography has historically been a curse. Flat plains with no natural defensive barriers mean that when powerful neighbors want to invade, there's nothing to stop them. Poland was divided up 3 times in the 18th century and occupied by both Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia in the 20th. For roughly 150 years, Poland did not exist as an independent country at all. But that same flatness, the absence of mountains, the productive farmland, the river connections to the Baltic, makes Poland a natural logistics hub. And in the 21st century, as the EU's internal market has deepened and as Ukraine becomes a massive rebuilding project requiring Western goods and services, Poland's position has flipped from a geographic weakness into a strategic strength. Poland is now the fastest growing large economy in the European Union. Its GDP per capita has roughly tripled over the last 25 years. That is 3 times the wealth in a single generation. Major logistics companies, manufacturers, and technology firms have moved significant operations there. Warsaw is becoming a genuine European financial center. The same geography that made Poland a target for centuries is now making it an indispensable hub in the most important regional economic corridor in the world. Ethiopia is the most interesting and most uncertain case. The Ethiopian highlands are not well understood outside Africa, but they are one of the most geographically significant features on the continent. At elevations up to 4,500 meters, the highlands catch rainfall that the rest of Northeast Africa never sees. The Blue Nile, which provides roughly 85% of the Nile's total flow, starts at Lake Tana in northwestern Ethiopia. This single fact means that Ethiopia controls the water supply for Sudan and Egypt, 2 countries with a combined population of over 130 million people. To put that another way, a country most people in the West couldn't find on a map without help controls the tap for one of the most geopolitically sensitive river basins on Earth. The highlands also produce something that most of sub-Saharan Africa lacks: reliable rainfall, fertile volcanic soils, and cool enough temperatures to dramatically cut the tropical disease burden. The highlands are not as malarial as the lowland tropics. They are cooler, drier, and historically supported dense farming populations with real surplus, which is why Ethiopia is the oldest continuously existing state in Africa, with a civilizational history stretching back thousands of years. Ethiopia has a population of over 120 million people, the second largest in Africa. It has a young workforce. It sits at the crossroads of East African trade routes and has access to the Red Sea through its relationships with Djibouti and Eritrea. If it can solve its political stability problems, and that is a very significant if, given the devastating civil war from 2020 to 2022 in the Tigray region, it has the geographic building blocks to be a major emerging economy within a generation. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, currently being filled on the Blue Nile, is itself a play on geographic leverage, using the country's highland water resources to generate hydroelectric power for industry. The question isn't whether the geography supports development. It clearly does. The question is whether the institutions can catch up with the geographic potential before conflict destroys the opportunity. And briefly, Indonesia. Indonesia is 17,000 islands straddling the Strait of Malacca, arguably the single most important shipping choke point on Earth. Every container ship moving between East Asia and Europe, every oil tanker moving from the Persian Gulf heading to China, passes through waters that Indonesia partially controls. The country sits at the meeting point of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, with economic zones stretching across some of the most strategically valuable sea territory in the world. Indonesia's fragmentation, all those islands, has historically held back economic and political unity. Managing a population of 270 million people spread across an archipelago roughly as wide as the continental United States is an administrative challenge of a completely different order than governing a country on a single landmass. Infrastructure costs are enormous. Political unity is constantly strained. But as sea trade becomes even more central to global commerce, Indonesia's geographic position becomes more valuable. It doesn't just sit near the Strait of Malacca. From a geopolitical perspective, it essentially is the Strait of Malacca. A country that can build the institutions to use that position, rather than simply being next to it, has the geographic assets to become one of the defining economies of the second half of this century. Geography doesn't determine everything, but it does determine what opportunities are available. And over the next century, these countries may have some of the strongest geographic advantages on Earth. But what do you think? Which country is most positioned to rise in the next few decades? And which one's being overlooked? If you want a deeper explanation of why geography shapes the rise and fall of countries, I made a longer video breaking down the full framework behind these examples. I'll link it here. The world has a structure. Let's keep finding it.